because that's what we're talking about, about the way it was seen to be, leaning towards one side, largely because of, the handshake. And the handshake featured quite prominently this year, particularly with the BBI, the ngoja we had with that BBI, the process. The report. Do you remember, Francis, we kept asking you, is it this week? Is it this week? Is it this week? There are indications that it's this week, it's next week, it's Thursday, it's Tuesday. I mean, let's talk about BBI, the handshake, what then happened in Jubilee Party for just a moment, just like a general state of the nation. And I think that was largely informed by the BBI, right, Linus?
Right, and let me talk about not BBI, but the handshake with regard to the fight against corruption. There's something it did right there. First of all, it ended and removed the biggest excuse in government whenever it came to questions about corruption. And let's remember the history of the Jubilee administration between 2013 and 2017. For anybody, whether it's media or in the opposition, who questioned or raised questions about corruption, you are immediately labeled. I remember
anti-development,
right.
Media propaganda. If you all remember the
Evil Society,
the NHIF, not NHIF, but the Ministry of Health,
the Afia
House scandal involving 5 billion shillings, the media was dismissed as propagandist. Now, the opposition, especially the opposition leader Raila Odinga, was dismissed as Yule Mganga, who doesn't want maendeleo and all that stuff. So when the handshake came, one excuse disappeared. But also the media got to do its job, because in the tense 2013-2017 term, honestly, it was quite a polarized country. Even in the manner the media was handling issues, everything was seen as a Raila versus Uhuru Kenyatta thing. Now, the handshake brought that to an end, and Jubilee got to look at itself in the eye and came to the realization that, look, we've been on a horrible run when it comes to the corruption trends in government. I mean, the admission was made that, things were not going on the right way. And if you look at the numbers involved and the number of cases that we're talking about, 2013 to maybe very, very recently, is easily the worst season ever in the country in terms of corruption. In the history of this country, we've never had that kind of corruption. So the handshake allowed some sobriety to set in for people to look at things with a more clear eye, and allowed the government to also make some admissions.
But the flip side can also be said to be true, that there was also a perception that those who are pro-handshake were kind of insulated from prosecution, and those anti-handshake, there was somewhat some fast-tracking of corruption cases against them. Actually, the joke was, if all you needed to do is, if you're accused of corruption, is to say, I support the handshake.
And I think that is a fair point to make, and to that extent, therefore, I think that the handshake has become a double-edged sword in 2019, in the sense that, on the one hand, yes, it had this effect of forcing Jubilee to look a little bit more inwardly and see what was happening within Jubilee. But on the other hand, it created yet another fault line, political fault line, along which one had to be on this or the other side, because our politics is structured in a way that there has to be one side or the other. And that adversarial nature of our politics meant that the moment the handshake came, and to the extent that some people viewed it as some kind of precursor to the political alignments that would happen ahead of 2022, then it elicited a hostile reaction from the supporters of the deputy president, because they were very suspicious about it. What is this going to be about? This messes up the neat arithmetic that the president had talked about. 10 nitafanya 10 yangu na huyu atafanya 10 yake. So that is the reason why, in my view, whereas the handshake may have had that positive effects, towards the end, it actually contributed a lot more towards the politicization of the war on corruption, so much so that it is difficult actually to see how that is going to succeed if we continue the way we continue.
And it's interesting, you mentioned about BBI, because I'd really like us to focus on that for a moment, if ladies and gentlemen, you'd allow me. BBI was supposed to be the thing that brought the country together, and the handshake, right? That was supposed to stop divisions. And yet, that is not what happened, you know, at least not this year. I mean, Jamila, BBI just sort of created other fault lines. And now we were just, so now it's still the for and against. It's just, you know, sort of same forest, same monkeys.
Different
trees.
Because I think Yvonne, the BBI to many was almost underwhelming.
Yes,
I've read somewhere, someone read the report and said there was nothing in there. And in fact, if you remember the event at Bomas, there wasn't really much opposition to it. Watu walikuwa nazungumza nikawa nasikizana, except what we saw with the Senator Murkomen, but that was something else, didn't have anything to do with the substance of the report. But then afterwards, now what is coming out is already kuna mgawanyiko between whether we are going to implement whatever is in the report through a parliamentary process or whether we'll go through a referendum. Forgetting that the report is just that, a report. It's not really a bill to go to parliament and be debated upon. So we have not had an instance where, and I said this last time when we spoke about this, where someone has actually come and spoken to the people about the substance of the BBI report. Why was this thing even, why was it created in the first place? Why was the committee appointed to look at all those issues that matter? National ethos, corruption, you know, unemployment, divisive elections. But no one is coming out to explain to people that this is what the report is all about. So you can have an informed decision going forward. One, two, the fact that whether we're going to go through a parliamentary system or through a referendum is still so far away, looking at what steps need to be taken to get to that point. Of course, you have a technical committee, make this into a bill, whatever it is. But for me, what really matters is that we need to understand exactly nini iko hapa, watu wache kuvutana, what is inside that report.
But to what extent has it been properly disseminated to the public?
Well,
beyond what we saw at the launch report, and then it's on some website.
There's an expectation now that the tenure of the task force has been extended. They will now move to the next step of telling us how, one, the general population will access the report, and two, the interaction with the content. Because as it stands now, very little is being discussed about the content. Actually, even the quorum, even of course, let's say the political class and people who are, let's say, tech-savvy have seen it on social media and everywhere else. The discussion so far is not about the content, actually. The discussion is about how to implement the recommendations. Yeah? And even at the very, very same Bomas, when the report was being unveiled to the public, you could clearly see the fault lines. Why? Because BBI is a product of a political process.
Handshake.
The handshake. And so those who are pro-handshake will embrace it big time. Those who are anti will be skeptical about it. And I hear Jamila say the report was underwhelming. Why was it underwhelming? Because there were expectations. There were expectations, but these expectations were built by the political players based on what they would have expected to see. And there was also a bit of propaganda, so that one, you bastardize the process even before you see the product.
Or you support it even before you see
Precisely, and also maybe trigger a bit of pressure on the task force that people are discussing the possibility of, let's say, a recommendation on a shift from presidential to parliamentary. You also trigger a bit of this. So when you don't find it and you've already told the public that this is likely to be,
for something else.
So people were expecting a certain report, but they didn't find it.
Which is probably why they're seeking a second round of public participation for the, you know, anyway, it's second round of views.
To get the views about the views.
Right. So let's take the break about the break. We want to come back. We will talk about a little bit more about BBI. Also what's happening within Jubilee, and just, you know, like you said, it's forced Jubilee to sort of look inward, and there's been quite a bit of, as Jamila would say, msuko within the Jubilee party. We'll be right back.